Welcome to the Ricky Mathews Show. We appreciate you joining us here on 103.1 SuperTalk Gulf Coast. Some of you are listening on Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast. And I don't care how you interact with the show as long as you interact with the show, because when you do, you're celebrating with me what it takes to make a community like coast of Mississippi and really the state of Mississippi tick. It's an honor to be here. And as I've said so many times, I just enjoy these conversations and the wonderful guests that we have along the way. By now you know, especially if you're a regular listener, I had a routine that I did every morning when I was a publisher. I got up at 3:30 in the morning. I read. You can imagine when you're a publisher of a newspaper, and then later in my career, regional president. You can only imagine the number of emails that I get from a wide variety of people. So there's a lot to process, always a lot to process. And I was incredibly thankful throughout my life that I always had support of a lot of really important people, and certainly important in my life, including my wife, Ann, I might add. But I was also gifted with a tremendous amount of energy. I had this like nuclear power plant working inside of me when I was doing what I did, and I was lucky to have it because I needed it, because there was a lot to process. But I enjoyed reading, even in the midst of the most difficult times of my career, after Katrina, during the digital tsunami and the strategic changes we were making at the companies that I was involved in. I always enjoyed reading in the mornings. It still does give me a great opportunity to be inspired, to learn. And as I've said on the show so many times, the more you learn, the more you better learn how much you don't know. That learning keeps you humble. It reminds you how much you don't know. And that if you're true to the process of continuous learning, you realize you never arrive. And the beauty of learning is just the journey and the discovery. You know, the other thing is that you relearn some things, because what happens is if you don't use it, you lose it, and stuff comes in, and if you don't use it, it gets stored away somewhere. Maybe it's still in your brain or in your soul somewhere, but you forget the file name for it. So when you read about something, it kind of conjures up some inspiration. And this morning I was reading, and I ran across a quote from Anne Frank. You may remember the really famous book, Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl, was a diary of Anne Frank, who in the spring of 1942, her father, Otto, had to create a place in hiding in Amsterdam as the situation with the Nazis in Germany and that region continued to ramp up. And with some help, they created this hiding place. And during the time in hiding, it was very cramped, and they had to remain very quiet. For those 2 years, Anne Frank wrote a diary. Eventually, unfortunately, during a raid, they were discovered, and they were initially brought to Auschwitz, and then from there they were sent to another concentration camp called the Bergen-Belsen camp. And it was cold and wet, and they didn't have food, and there were a lot of contagious diseases. And Anne and her sister Margot eventually succumbed to typhus and died in 1945. But her diary has been a great inspiration to so many over the years. Her father actually lived, and until his death, he died in 1980, incidentally. He was involved in the Anne Frank House, and he hoped that her writings, would make us all aware of the dangers of discrimination and racism, and especially the hatred of Jews that existed at that time. But, it was written about Anne Frank that she had a vivid impression of her experiences. It said that she was thoughtful and moving and surprisingly humorous. And it was a fascinating commentary on the human courage and frailty and compelling self-portrait of a sensitive and spirited young woman, and so on. It's just, we could go on and do a whole show on Anne Frank, but here's what she said. She said this, and this is what kind of sparked me wanting to go back and refresh my memory. She was born, incidentally, in June of 1929, and here's what she said. I keep my ideals because in spite of everything I still believe, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. I keep my ideals because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. What a great testament that is about the resilience of the human spirit And anyway, it's when you read about someone like Anne Frank, it's a great reminder of live in the moment, understand that people around us are really good. And if I had to say something really amazing about Mississippians, it's that people who come here, they immediately see in the heart and soul of Mississippians that this thing they thought of us, that we were just terrible, racist people. Unfortunately, that's a perception sometimes that it still exists, that they see that we are actually quite good people and we're working together well, and we don't deserve that reputation. And I could go on about that. But someone who gets that is my friend Dave Dennis. Dave owns with his kids specialty contractors in Gulfport. He's a former gubernatorial candidate. He's had tremendous experience. We'll get into some of that in just a second. But Dave knows well what I'm saying about what's in the heart and soul of Mississippians, and he's going to be my guest for the entire show today. How you doing, my friend, Dave?
I'm doing well, Ricky. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity. And your monologue was certainly spot on, and this is a great state. I'm a transplant here, and I was kind of chuckling as you were talking. We moved here by choice as 22-year-olds, 22 and 23-year-olds, Jane and I did. And I got to tell you, I expected to be here for a couple of years, get a business set up, and then migrate back to the Mobile area, and then just let this be a satellite. Well, after about a year or two, we figured out, you know what? Mobile's going to be a satellite. So that's how we wound up ultimately doing it. And the community received us incredibly well, not only in terms of us being accepted as people, but in terms of a sense of inclusion, of family, of the education system on the coast was strong, and we just we felt it as our home. And candidly, this is home. When I go back to Alabama, I mean, it's just to visit family for a day or two, and that's about it. But at this point, I got to tell you, the Mississippi is probably one of the most underrated states in this country, if not the most underrated. And I'll take it. We chuckle sometimes. Do we really want everybody to know how good it is here? They may all want to move here if we tell everybody. So honestly, if people come and take a look, and you've seen it through Chambers, you've seen it through a lot of other venues, a lot of tourism activities, if people get a look, see, and a touch and a feel and a sense of what's really going on here, they like it. And they understand there's some magic here. And there really is some magic on the coast.
Well, I've had so many conversations with people, Mississippians who have to travel a lot, and when they do, they sort of carry a bit of a burden with them to help dispel myths about Mississippi, and they
you're
do
almost
that
on the defensive sometimes. And honestly, I've quit doing that. I just tell them I'm dang proud to be here and be from Mississippi. And have you ever been here? Well, why haven't you been here? Here's my phone number. Call me. I'll show you around. Get down here now.
Hey, the other thing that I love about the show is the opportunity to visit with leaders in this community who are not from here, who came here more recently. I'll give you an example. Shari and Craig Davis own the Bootleg Howl Bread and Breakfast in Biloxi. They own the Jackson Pearl in Ocean Springs. It's a wedding venue. And man, I had such a great conversation with them. And when I actually ended up pulling something that she said, but because of the way she talked about it, they sold their business in California. They moved here. They fell in love with it. And she said, people here, they love. They don't care who you are, where you came from, who you love. They love you. And that is so true. You saw it, more recently after the tornadoes that hit the lower Delta, you saw how neighbor helped neighbor and the world comes together in the cases like that. I was saddened recently, and I actually posted something about this, that the New York Times did a terrific story recently about the advancements that Mississippi has made around education. I mean, the work that we have done around education is just incredible, centered around reading and the work that they've done to help raise school scores, et cetera. But they also, there's also a paragraph in there simply reminding people that Mississippi is a racist state. And it's just, we
try to nuke those people. And there's two major children's education groups. The Canopy group about. I'm on, and this is not an I comment, but I'm on the state board. The other one is the Children's Foundation of Mississippi. I chair that. And I got to tell you, it penetrates into exactly what you're saying. It gets into trying to encourage the providers, the daycare, so to speak, and I'm using that loosely, but early childhood education venues, giving them the opportunity to understand these are best case practices. Don't want any regulatory abilities, don't want any authority, don't want anything other than encouragement. And that's what's going on. It's an incredibly strong group, and the support, and it's driven mostly by foundational support. It comes from conservatives. It comes from what would traditionally be considered as your typical education-driven foundations. And it's a pretty amazing group that is really exploding in this state in the areas it needs to be. But the interviews, in fact, we got 2 Harvard students coming in this summer, and have had them every summer for the last 3 years, coming in, understanding the state and taking it back home with them.
It's a great story of Mississippi's progress in education, but again, they always have to remind everyone in the world that Mississippi is not a good place if you don't like racism. It's sad that we have to deal with that.
Well, let me
anyway,
tell you,
when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation.
Comment, Ricky,
we'll do that on the other side. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I went back, Dave, when I first had you on the show. We've visited several times, but the first time we told your entire story. And I want to share with you the way I opened that show because I think it's so right. In fact, we just tripped over it just then because of the 2 foundations you just mentioned that you're involved in the state. But here's what I said. Dave helped shape the coast literally and figuratively. He built a strong company and specialty contractors that has stood the test of time. His business success is only matched by his commitment to the community and family. And to top it off, he's a former gubernatorial candidate. It would take me the rest of this show to list his many accomplishments over the many years. You and I worked shoulder to shoulder for, I can't remember how long we worked together, but we've been out there, swinging for the good of this community for a long time, haven't we, my friend?
Well, it's amazing. I heard George Slugglemaker comment 30 years ago. It's amazing what you can get done when you don't care who gets credit. 1 million people have said that, but it's certainly true, and it stuck with me. And I've never needed credit. I've never needed the adulation or pat on the back. You certainly haven't. And I think that's really some of the chemistry and some of the magic that has made this coast work so well, Ricky. People just want it to be a place that their children would come back to. Would they come back and live? Hopefully. Would they have a job? Hopefully. But if you can foster and instill an environment in a community that fosters at least an opportunity, that's what we're trying to do. I love nothing better than seeing other people succeed. It's just a sense of humility when you see that. Whether it's I've had scouts, Lord, I don't even know how many scouts have gone through. I do Eagle Scout reviews, scouts, coaching, Boy State, Girl State. There are 1 million kids I work with over the years. And when they walk up to you and they start talking to you, you don't have a clue who they are. And they introduce their kids. Oh, that's great. I don't have a clue who they are. I can't remember. 35 years. I don't know who you are. But I'll never tell them. But they come back, and they come back with a positive sense of community, and they come back with a sense of family and parenting. And that's what I try to do. And honestly, that's what I've tried to do. Business is work. Could we have devoted more to business and been more successful? Probably. So what? I'm not hungry, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I got a call from a friend recently, and he just wanted to tell me how much he's enjoyed listening to the show. And he said, he said, in spite of all your experience, and that's the one thing. If there's a comment I get from people, it is, you seem to know so much about so many things. And when you're the publisher of a newspaper for 16 years, you learn a lot about a lot of things, you know. And it puts you in a position where you can converse with a wide range of people, and I'm honored to be able to do that. But he said, I appreciate the way the show's not about you. The show's about your guests. And that my knowledge, the experience that I've gained along the way, just provides me a great template for having conversations, again, with a wide variety of people. But it's a great way to celebrate. And, Dave, I know that the last thing you want to do is come on this show and talk about yourself. But what I love about it, the same way I felt about the leadership awards that we created at the Sun Herald, and that is that it as much as we can do this, in other words, hold others up as examples for others to look at and say, I want to emulate what they're doing. I want to get involved. I want to do my reps in the community. I want to be a leader in the community. Yeah. If we we're educating people in that way, and that's what the goal of the show is ultimately, then we will have really, done a good day's work is the way I look at it.
Well, I think so. I'm gonna flip back for just a moment and touch on something you mentioned earlier about perhaps the perception, and that some people have to put a little asterisk. Oh, by the way, it's Mississippi. All that does for most leaders, for most true leaders, not political people that are simply there to climb a ladder, but people that really have their heart and soul into it. All that's going to do is get them fired up and make them work that much harder, and say, "Come on down," and challenge those people. Have you ever been here? Well, then come down here. I'll pay your airline ticket. Come down here and let me show you what we have. And then if you still feel that way, then write your story again. But I have done that many times, and a couple of people have actually taken me up on it, and they go away with a different perspective. But that is what I feel. But no, you have a sense of community. I do. And where it came from, probably from your parents, most likely, probably from you being a good parent. But in reality, it comes from believing in the people that you're around. I don't care if you're rich, poor, black, white, Republican, Democrat, I make any difference. The answer is you've got, to me, a unified community on the coast with a few outliers, but generally a very, very unified community on the coast. And I'm going to work my duster off to protect it. I'm going to do everything I can to try and keep a sense of traction, so to speak, so that people will want to come here, so that tourism will be strong, so that people want to locate a business here, so that retirees, when they either get out of the military or retire, they'll come here and continue to grow our community and bring in different perspectives and different points of view, and certainly invest in the community. And that's candidly what I have done. Why? I don't know. Could I have directed in a different direction? Sure. But in reality, it wouldn't have been as much fun. I couldn't go fishing with you if it did all that.
Yeah, no, there's no. Hey, listen, man. Here's for real though. One of the beauties of this show is that it gives people a chance to see what it takes to build a community that's successful, that's resilient. So you have nonprofits that are working together. You've got the business council that's sort of more the global view that we worked together to help form after Katrina. And anyway, United Way and Red Cross and all these different groups working together to build a great community. And you know what? When you're in the heat of the moment, in other words, you're really in the trenches doing the heavy lift, rarely am I surrounded by anyone who gives a crap whether they get credit or not.
Matter of fact, they don't want credit. An
image that comes to mind, I'll give you an image that comes to mind, is sitting with Haley Barber and you and John Hairston and George Schlogel and Jerry St. Pay and a wide range of others, and we're sitting down and we're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get ourselves out of this mess that we were in after Katrina?
Yeah.
What I came to appreciate, I got a call from a guy a year after Katrina, literally a year after Katrina, and this guy was a leader in the community before Katrina, and he said, I said, "Where have you been? I haven't seen you." He said, "Well, I wasn't asked to be involved, so I got my feelings hurt." I said, "Are you kidding me? None of us were asked to be involved. You assume authority where authority's lacking, and you get busy. Amazing that you would." I said, "Look, okay, you weren't there." I called it the finger pricking. When we became blood brothers in the weeks and months after Katrina, he wasn't there for that moment. And he will forever regret it. But, man, we're tired. We need help. Come and join us. That's the way I looked at it.
Well, look, I brought one of my brothers by there. There's 5 in my family. I brought one of my brothers by your office, I don't know, a week or 2 after Katrina. And we're sitting there. I don't even know if you had electricity, candidly, but we're sitting in there. And Tommy had run the private label division of Vanity Fair. This is a several billion-dollar operation.
I remember the visit. I remember.
And we come in, and I don't even know if we had on cut-off blue jeans or long blue jeans. It doesn't matter. But we came in and sat, and this is a corporate jock that has succeeded beyond imagination in the corporate world. His answer to me was not even a question. He just answered me. He said, "What can we do?" So he came down, and he stayed here for several weeks. Ran into you a time or two, and it's just it's a time that if you truly believe in something, it's just like in a relationship, in a marriage, in parenting, whatever you're doing, if there's a concern or a crisis, that's when you really have to put your A game out there. You don't sit around and wait for leadership to show up. You let leadership follow you if you choose to. And I think that's what you're talking about in those meetings. When President Bush would come in, it was kind of amazing. He would sit there in awe and just kind of look, and he'd shake his head and go, "Y'all got this. Y'all got this."
Hey,
You may have it, but we could use a little help along the way too. But
he came to coastal Mississippi 12 times.
Yeah.
And because I was leading the tourism effort at the time, and Haley had a tendency to want to include the core group of us in most of his visits. I was so impressed with the way that this is President Bush I'm talking about. He would take copious notes. And, as you know, Haley was always deferential, very deferential. I remember so many meetings, like one, for example, where General Honore was there and Trent Lott and I think Thad Cochran was there and Barbara Bush and the president and Andy Carr. I mean, listen, and still Haley Barbour was the smartest guy in that room. I mean, it was
no doubt.
It was, and then and the way that President Bush took copious notes. But what you got to see, we were fortunate because we got to see how all these elements played together. And it could be argued, and it's certainly the time I've spent in New Orleans, I came to appreciate this. It could be argued that President Bush was not in touch with the realities of what was happening on the ground relative to Katrina in the initial days. But he came to appreciate it and understand it. And he did not get credit for the amount of energy and time he put on it. Well, I'll get your response to that on the other side, but we're visiting with Dave Dennis. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend, entrepreneur, business owner, community leader, Dave Dennis, former gubernatorial candidate. When we went to break, we were talking about George Bush and his commitment to coastal Mississippi after the storm. And I tell you, one of the things I'm really glad is that Haley wrote the book, America's Storm, because it really, forever has put on paper the incredible leadership that had to occur in coastal Mississippi to make this place come back, and people can learn from the experience.
You did the forward on it, if I'm not mistaken, did you?
I did.
Well, interestingly, you were mentioning President George W. Bush, 43. Was he as sensitive, perhaps as the press wanted him to be in the first day or two? I think clearly he understood that it was a major concern. But once the water started penetrating and inundating New Orleans, it's a whole different game, whole new ball game. Well, that was day 2 or so is when it really became evident what was going on. But I will tell you from my experience with him, from dealing with him, from being around him, from being around his family, not only was he engaged, he was very concerned and sincerely concerned, very sincerely concerned. His dad was the same way when he would come. And my sense of it was, he put politics aside, totally aside. And you mentioned Haley being Governor Barbour, perhaps being the smartest guy in the room. I'm certainly not going to contest that. There would be some folks that would be on the podium with him, but I don't know who would be holding up the gold medal. But sitting in there in like 2008, when the economy started melting, before it really melted, we had a guy. I was still part of the Federal Reserve. I got my $200 a month to chair New Orleans, then head up the national group of directors, which was really interesting. But we sat with a man, Dave Altig. He was head of the economics department at the University of Chicago, but he also doubled as an economist with the Federal Reserve. So we're sitting in Jackson one day, and he's telling Haley, he says, the economy is decelerating, and the pace of deceleration is accelerating. And he said, Haley says, that's not good. And he said, oh, no, that's not good. Anyway, he got it immediately and took it and ran with it. And you saw him dial down the state. He was ahead of the curve. And again, it doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat. He was ahead of the curve. He was a leader. And I think that's what you see on the coast. And sometimes, we look at our younger generation. Are those kids stepping up? They may not be stepping up, but they will step up. And you and I have had this conversation, Ricky. There was a core group of about 20 or so after Katrina that literally just did whatever was humanly possible. The business council you mentioned, there were 11 or 12 of us that pitched pennies in and incorporated it. And it became, I think, the focal point of what's going on. Did I just lose it? I can't tell if I lost you.
Yeah, you're still there. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But it became the focal point of the coast. So as a business community looked toward a business council, it took issues, and instead of taking a shotgun approach and approaching 10 or 12 issues, it focused in on 2 or 3 or 4 issues, and it became, to me, the landmark organization for the coast. And it's in many respects it still is. But leadership matters. But I think your younger generation is clearly willing to step up. If you look at Coast Young Professionals, if you look at the under 40 presentations that are made, leadership is there, and I think they get it also. And I think it's still incumbent upon us, but of the 20 or so that really were trying to take the coast and try to get your business put back together, get your personal life put back together, get your home put back together. We also understood the global aspect of, we got a bigger picture to deal with, or it's not going to matter what your home looks like or what your business looks like, because it's going to be null and void. So that was a really intriguing, I'm going to say, monumental point in many people's lives. But that group of 20 or 25 at the most, there's only 4 or 5 that are really still super active, and it's still refreshing to see people come in. But you clearly had a lead point in that, and a point position that I think the coast probably doesn't even need to know who really stepped up and who did things. The point is, people did what they had to do, Ricky, and that's true in life. Forget Katrina, it's true in all our lives and all our businesses.
Dave, I think that what's important about the conversation we're having, and for people who are listening, I tend to often think about life on the coast pre-Katrina and post-Katrina, because when you consider, again, you have to remind yourself. And so there are a lot of leaders involved in Coast Young Professionals that were just, 10 years old when Katrina hit, And you have to remind yourself that this is the worst natural disaster in American history, and it took an effort, local, state, and federal effort, unlike anything we've ever seen before. I had the pleasure of being chairman of the Citizen Advisory Committee for the Knight Foundation that you had been involved in throughout at times along the way, and the role that my friend Alberto Ibargüen played in helping us get money. Adele Lyons was our Knight Foundation employee at the time, and the work that she did, and now she's chairman of the Coast Chamber. But for the Knight Foundation, the Knight Center came as a result of Alberto's incredible focus here. He was here on the ground within 1 week of the storm.
The Knight Foundation's generous contribution is really
$1 million. I mean, he said, "What will it take?" I said, $1 million. We need $1 million. Jim Barksdale is going to give $1 million. We'd like to get $1 million from the Knight Foundation. And he said, "Look, introduce me to your governor, and we'll go from there." So Haley and Alberto talked. Alberto didn't pause. He contributed $1 million even without a board approval. He joked about that later, that they didn't even think twice about it. But it was important to run the governor's commission with private money, because they didn't want to have state money going into it. It would have kind of made it more cumbersome.
Well, you would have had a full bid process. Interestingly, on the coastal area, the 2 major conduits for money, Gulf Coast Community Foundation and the Build Back the Coast Fund, my late wife Jane chaired both of them at that point in time. And she co-chaired the Build Back the Coast Fund with Margaret Taylor, our former Congressman Gene Taylor's wife, Margaret, who was so super. But those 2 girls were unbelievable in terms of trying to get in the community. In fact, the Sun Herald had a picture of Jane standing with President Carter, literally hammering on a house. And I remember the night before it was turned over, Jane went out and bought curtains. When we went and hung curtains in this house, this lady walks in the house. She about has a stroke walking in the house going, "Oh my gosh, look at this." Well, y'all ran a picture. David Purdy, who used to work with you, David took a picture of her. And it had to be a 12 by 12 color picture of Jane literally crying with that lady. And I think that's what you saw, was the heart and soul of people getting engaged, getting involved, and wanting to make it work. But it's still true, Rick. It's true for any kind of business. You building this show up you're on right now, if you don't come across with some kind of sincerity and credibility, you're going to be one and done with each person that views it. That's it. So you
Hey,
better
listen,
do your A game every day.
Steve Davenport, who owns SuperTalk, and Kim Dillon, the president, said to me when we first started the show, he said, just think of it this way. You're sitting at your table, dinner table, having a glass of wine with a really good friend, and you're having a conversation, and it just needs to be interesting. And then the other thing is when you're in radio, you can't ever fake it. Of course, I knew that. I knew that as a publisher, because people will figure that out so fast that it makes your head spin.
Yeah, you get one shot at a first impression. That's it. One.
You do. And look, if you don't know something, you need to tell. You need to say so. Boy, that's why I focus a lot on this notion of you can never know it all. You know, that life's a journey. You better learn how much you don't know. And I love learning. I love, talking to people like you and learning. But what you and I and Chevis and George and John Harrison and this group of people can give back to this community is to constantly remind people what it takes to build a great community. Because then if we were, the thing is, it shouldn't take a Katrina to get us all in the trenches working toward making this a better place. Okay. We should all, as I said at the One Coast Award 2 years ago, we should all be focused on fighting complacency. I mean, as Jerry points out, that's the biggest issue that we face, that Ingalls and Chevron are always going to be there. The blue chip industries that are part of Stennis are always going to be there. That gaming is always going to be here. If we are complacent, we will lose.
Don't take it for granted.
We got to fight the status quo. There are too many, in fact, unfortunately, a lot of them in public life and in political life that protect the status quo. We can't protect the status quo. We got to advance the ball. And we have to fight mediocrity. We cannot ever be satisfied with where we are. We have to push the ball forward. And by taking the learnings, this notion of when the going gets tough, the tough get calm. That's what we saw after Katrina. We calmly said, okay, let's look at the situation and let's figure out how we're going to work our way out of this. There's a lot to learn from when you and I get together. And I hope that young people and even leaders that are now just getting involved in the community can understand that there's no surface involvement that results in good results. Everyone's got to get in the trenches. Hey, Dave, I'll let you respond on the other side as we continue our conversation with Dave Dennis in this terrific visit we're having today. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I have my friend Dave Dennis from Specialty Contractors, longtime community leader across the state of Mississippi, former gubernatorial candidate here in Mississippi, and just a really, really good friend. When we went to break, we were just talking about fighting complacency and the status quo and all that. What's your reaction to that?
I think if you're happy with status quo, then good for you. Most of us probably are not, but I recall from the 1990 Leadership Gulf Coast class, the late Gene Ward made a comment, and he said, if you're a leader, you're going to ruffle feathers, and just always know that somebody is going to be upset with what you do. Somebody's not going to like what you say, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of it. I don't think you had full viewership or readership of your paper that was candidly in 100% lockstep with what you said. And on what we're saying today, there are going to be plenty of naysayers, and that's fine. Then roll your sleeves up and try to change it. But Ricky, I think it's incumbent on people to be a leader if you choose to, if you have it, and you don't have to be, but at least look for some target, look for something that is a goal, look for a purpose in life, and go for it. I mean, I'm, for all intents and purposes, retired at this point. I am working on one job, the Model Railroad Museum, the Traintastic, that opens up actually on the 17th. So I got to tell you, I look at what Richard and Glenn Mueller did as a gift to the community, and you had Cindy Walker and Glenn Mueller on a few months ago, but they're giving the community a phenomenal, very expensive gift, and we're having the privilege of working on it. But Cindy Walker's running it, and it is going to be, I think, one of the incredible attractions. But I'm saying that to say, not as a plug, but as what does leadership look like? Leadership can look like, I'm going to give this to the community, and it's going to be a draw to help hopefully improve a blighted area. Or I'm going to do this for the community to help scouting or ball clubs, whatever it may be, or education, which candidly we could have a whole you and I can have a whole topic on early childhood education. I'll give you another hour or two on that if you wish. But it's leadership means you care. That's what it means. It means you care, and it means you're willing to take whatever commentary people offer, good or bad, and take it and move the ball in the direction it needs to go. You understand that. I do. Many people do, and I think this community, particularly the coastal area, is in extraordinarily good hands and moving in that direction. And the state, in most respects, is also.
I think that's so well said. The notion about ruffling feathers, I knew well, as you well know, as being the publisher of the newspaper and willing to take tough positions from time to time, especially after Katrina. I mean, I fought a few fights after Katrina, and I fought a few on this show. But no, obviously, that's not what this show is about. But if an issue does come up, I'm willing to address it. And what's interesting is that it's a part of the culture of Mississippians that we don't like to ruffle feathers. So it's kind of going a bit against the grain when we do that. But we have to be willing to do that. We have to be willing to say that these people or that person doesn't have the best interest of the community at heart. And like you said, that's okay. It's not personal. It's just it's a difference of opinion about how we should achieve the goal.
Well, I faced some linebackers that played at Tennessee and Georgia and Florida and other places when I would dress out at Auburn occasionally. And those guys, they wanted your head. The people on the coast just have a different opinion. We can sway their opinion. We can get their opinion and move it in a different direction. We can move it to where, all right, I respect what you're saying, but let's take another look. There may be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 correct answers. Let's get to the best correct answer. And I think that's what leadership does. And I think grabbing the bull by the horns and running with it and honestly showing people that this probably is the best answer. It's not a bad way to go. I still got a little gas in my tank. I'm going to keep plugging along and until I get totally put out to pasture, I'm going to keep at it.
And that's kind of the way I feel about it too. I had my, almost 5-year break, and then I still consider myself retired like you. But you can be retired and give back to the community. You can be retired and still be engaged.
Well, I still do. I still do some at work. I'm minimally involved at work, and candidly, the generation that are our customers, so to speak, they're my children's age. They're not my age, and that's okay. I worked hard to get to this point, and I think I'm sure willing to enjoy it.
And you've got some smart kids who are incredibly capable.
Well, I give their mom I give her mom the credit for that. You know that story. So
I have a very similar
Jane
story.
Certainly didn't mind ruffling feathers. If there was an issue that needed to be addressed, you might as well just go ahead and agree before you even discussed it. So it'd make your life a lot simpler.
Well, first of all, Jane was smart as hell and tough as nails, man, when she got locked onto something. And you better know what you're talking about if you were going to go toe-to-toe with Jane.
I agree with that. Anyway, life has been good, and I continue to enjoy it.
Hey, Dave, we'll get together more often. These conversations are really beneficial to our audience. I know that for a fact. And when we get back together, in fact, we'll get something scheduled next couple of weeks. I want to talk about the Federal Reserve and this, all these variables, in terms of the economy these days. And we can spend a little time actually on early childhood development, why that's so darn important to the education system. But for now, we're out of time. Have a great day, my friend.
Thank you. Be safe. Thanks.
This has been Dave Dennis. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.